Control object and classes. So the control object is a software object that control the overall behavior of the system. So by using the control object, we are controlling other objects, the other use cases of the system. So the control object used to model the use cases or other use cases. So you can imagine the control object like the orchestra that's controlling other. So the control object also have three types of the objects. The first is a coordinator, the second is state dependent control, and the timer. So let's see now these three objects and what the difference between them. Since the three is used for controlling the behavior of the system, so what the difference between these three objects? First, let's start with coordinators object. The coordinators object is often uh, used to control the overall sequence of the system, the execution of the system. So mostly we have many we can say many operators or many operation that should be done by the system. So the control the object that control these operations is the coordinators. One point here, the coordinator objects make its decision based on the input, based on the some input of the input of the user or input of another object. So let's see an example of the coordinators. As we see, as I said, the control object or the coordinators used to control other operators. So in this example, we have here the bank coordinator is the class. We create a coordinator object. So this is the object. So we have here many transactions. So one is, for example, bin validation, one for withdraw, query, transfer. So each this one is an operation. Operation should be done by the system. So based on the user request, so here we have another object. The object is subsystem, is ATM client. So based on the user request, so if the user, for example, request a transfer, a money transfer transaction, so based on these request, the coordinator will send a request to these object and then receive the output or the result from this object. If the user requests withdrawal, so the user or the coordinator will send this to the user and then so also here if the user request is a query about his account, so this query will send to the bank system and then the result will back to the user and so on for withdrawal and bin validations. So the user here or the coordinator here just controlling another operations. So this is all is business logic. We will see what's the business logic. So all these objects is a business logic which is hiding some techniques for or the what we can say is the operation or the methods for transfer the money. So these objects is controlled by the coordinators. So here this is the coordinator object. In the coordinator object we are controlling other transaction or other operation in the system. And one point here, controlling this sequence or controlling this process, this transaction, based on the request of the user. The another type of control objects is state dependent control. So in state dependent control, actually we can say is the main difference between the coordinators and the the state dependent control. It's based in the coordinators. It's based on the request, based on some input, while here based on the situation of the state, the situation of the system. In this, it's based on the situation of the system. So here we controlling the system based on the current situation of the system. So uh, the output or the result of the state dependence objects, it's not only based on the input but also based on the current state of the system. So see, let's see here an example also. It's the same. It's the ATM control. Here is the class, and then we create the ATM control object. And this control, actually, as we see here, we have a sequence of operations. But these operations, it's done uh, based on the current state. So, for example, printing the receipt will not done before dispense the cash. So here is the sequence of the sequence of the state is important. The sequence of the operation is important. So here the second type of object, and the difference between the coordinator and state dependence is that uh, it's here is mostly based on the current state of the system. So the system here, the ATM, is controlling two objects, and here the output. It's a boundary object. So by we controlling these two objects is not the type of this is not like the other is. So we controlling these two types of object, which is the boundary interfaces. The last object of controlling, the last type of controlling object, it's timer. So if your system is based on the timer, so you have to create a timer object, and this timer use to represent the timer that we use. For example, if you use the timer of the PC, or the timer of the system, which is the operating system clock. So we create a timer for in object timer, and then based on this timer we can control another object or another operation. For example, here this system, for example, is preparing weekly reports. So every week you should do print or prepare a report. So based on this timer, so the report timer is prepare or send a signal to this unit to prepare the weekly reports. So the third objects, it's the timer, which use the timer from the system or even real timer. So use it for control any operations.